Good evening. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 16 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. The committee is meeting on its study of challenges of the Parliamentary Interpretation Service in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have a certain number of procedures, and I know that many of you are already familiar with them, but we do have witnesses joining us tonight, so if I may, I would like to go through them. But first of all, I would like to wish a warm welcome to our new member, Mr. Joël Godin.
I would like to take the opportunity to remind all participants to the meeting that screenshot or taking photo of your screen is not permitted, and also highlight the fact that it was mentioned by the Speaker Rota on September 2019, 2020. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen, or either FLOR, English, or French. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own mic. And when you are done speaking, please put your mic on mute to minimize any interference. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When speaking, please slowly and clearly. Unless there are exceptional circumstances, the use of headsets with a boom microphone is mandatory for everyone participating remotely. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise the chair. Please note that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Et pour les personnes qui sont présentes,
And for those participating in person, please be advised that masks are required unless seated and when physical distancing is not possible. Should you wish to get my attention, signal the clerk. And I would also now like to welcome our witnesses. First, we have Steve McKinnon, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Services and Procurement. And with him are people from the Department of Public Works and Government Services, or rather, it is Michael Vandergrift. He is Associate Deputy Minister. And we have Lucie Séguin, Chief Executive Director, Officer of the Translation Bureau, and Matthew Ball, Director and Chief Interpreter of the Translation Bureau. So, Mr. Parliamentary Secretary, you have 7.5 minutes to give your presentation, and then each party will have 6 minutes per party to ask you questions. On that note, Mr. McKinnon, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and thank you to the committee members for your kind invitation. I'm speaking to you from near the Ottawa River. And let me just say that for 4 years, I have been pleased and proud to serve as Parliamentary Secretary to this department. And I'm pleased to be joined by those with me today. I am pleased to have this opportunity to speak about how our department is working to protect the health and safety of our interpreters during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Translation Bureau, which is about 87 years old, is part of Public Services and Procurement Canada, and it supports the government in its efforts to serve and communicate with Canadians by providing linguistic services such as translation and interpretation in both official languages, as well as in Indigenous and foreign languages. In addition to spoken languages, we also provide interpretation in signed languages. The exceptional work of our interpreters is essential in facilitating meetings such as this one. Interpreters work mostly behind the scenes, ensuring parliamentarians and Canadians can follow our proceedings in the official language of their choice. Their work has been especially important over these past months. I know I speak for all of you and all parliamentarians, as well as all Canadians, when I say a heartfelt thank you to our interpreters.
The Translation Bureau created the Conference Interpretation Advisory Panel and a special procurement working group representing the freelance interpreters community as, together, we sought a new contracting mechanism. Many of the 6 guiding principles, and I worked on those with Minister Foote at the time, agreed upon between PSPC's acquisitions branch, the Translation Bureau, and the interpreter community back then, continue to guide us today. First, our goal was to ensure compliance with the federal government's contracting policy by maximizing flexibility and agility to meet the specific needs of the interpretation community. Second, and this is very important, to focus on the quality of services offered to clients. Third, promote the economic vitality of Canada's interpretation community. Fourth, to work together to define the most relevant, sustainable, and effective tool for all. Fifth, to reduce the administrative burden associated with the new solution, both for the interpreter community and for the Translation Bureau. And finally, we recognize the practices related to the profession of conference interpretation, et je dis bien la profession.
And I do mean it when I say it's a profession. We worked to make sure that our interpreters have the support they need to do their jobs safely. Their health and well-being remains the top priority. Creating the best possible conditions for interpretation ensures not only that the language rights of all Canadians are respected, but that the dedicated professionals who provide this service are protected at all times.
Our Translation Bureau works closely with the House of Commons and the Senate, federal departments and agencies, and other partners to provide interpretation of parliamentary and government proceedings, including virtual sessions. Je tiens à préciser.
To be clear, the Bureau is not responsible for the technical aspects related to interpretation, such as providing the necessary equipment. That responsibility belongs to our clients, including the House of Commons Administration, with whom the Bureau collaborates closely to make sure interpreters have everything they need to provide quality service. Even in ordinary times, interpretation is a demanding and complex task. We know that it requires very specific technical conditions to be performed safely, particularly with respect to sound quality. The pandemic has forced us to find different ways to meet and to work together. Now more than ever, it is especially important to respect public safety guidance. As we rely more and more on virtual meetings, we continue to adapt to new challenges.
And safety is a priority for Parliament, and it is a priority for our government. And we are making every effort to ensure our staff and freelance interpreters are protected. At all times, Mr. President and Mr. Chair, interpreters are instructed to interrupt the service. Sorry, I should say that again. They are instructed to interrupt the service if the sound does not allow for safe interpretation.
Since virtual sessions of Parliament became the norm, the government has strengthened existing measures to protect interpreters at meetings involving remote participants. Many of these measures came out of recommendations made to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. For example, Parliament is providing headsets with an integrated microphone to members of Parliament, as you know, and to senators, as well as to witnesses appearing before parliamentary committees. These headsets improve sound quality and decrease health and safety incidents. Further examples, the interpreters have support from technicians, and as we know, sound checks are conducted ahead of meetings.
Translation Bureau has reduced the length of assignments for interpreters working at virtual sessions without reducing their compensation. The Bureau has also instructed participants to provide written statements to interpreters in advance, like I have done tonight when possible, as well as to use video conference to allow interpreters to see their facial expressions and adjust their tone. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, to ensure high quality and safe interpretation services, the Translation Bureau is pushing forward with several research initiatives to develop evidence-based solutions. For example, it has undertaken a research project with the University of Geneva in Switzerland on fatigue and cognitive load.
National Research Council of Canada has tested a new active sound limiter. This type of device can protect interpreters from acoustic shock and measure their daily exposure to sound levels so that they can avoid exceeding the daily dose. The Conseil National.
The NRC has also provided the Bureau with preliminary results of an analysis to confirm that sound levels in Parliament do not exceed federal noise exposure regulations, and is continuing testing and sampling to ensure safer working conditions. I would also like to highlight that the Parliament of Canada, on the advice of the Bureau, has replaced all of its interpretation consoles with models equipped with built-in sound limiters, which also meet international standards.
Support of health and safety experts at PSPC and external audiologists, the Bureau is developing a hearing protection standard for interpreters. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic prompted an abrupt shift in how interpretation services are being delivered. Although far from ready to go completely virtual, the work to improve conditions for interpretation was already well underway. Mr. Parliamentary Secretary, I was just about finished. Well, thank you very much for respecting the time allocated. I know there were members who had already notified me of the questions they wanted to ask. And for the time being, I have Mr. Blaney, followed by Mr. Williamson, who will have 6 minutes to ask your questions. Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to our witness and his partners. Thank you, Mr. McKinnon, for being here at our committee. Interpreters are facing numerous challenges. I would like to thank you for the awareness that you demonstrated regarding our interpreters. We've already had 2 meetings on this study. This is our 3rd. We thought it was important to get straight to it. And you mentioned that headsets are being provided, but we've learned that additional quality could be achieved for our interpreters. They have an additional difficulty because they must hear over their own voice. So my suggestion, Mr. Parliamentary Secretary, would be to provide high-quality headsets. Sometimes the headsets we are given have only one earpiece. And something else I wanted to discuss with you is the following. This evening, our chair is in Montreal. You're in Gatineau. So as you see, there are meetings where everyone is virtual, and there are also hybrid meetings. What I'm getting at is the definition of virtual interpreting. What we want is to ensure that there is a sufficient number of interpreters being sent. 3 appears to be the right number. The interpreters at the House do very essential work. Yes, certainly, Mr. Blaney. Thank you, and thank you to everyone for your concern regarding the health and safety and working conditions of interpreters whom I thank again wholeheartedly for their work. As I said in my presentation regarding headsets and all technical equipment that we use in our work, or that the interpreters use, it is Parliament and our clients, in general who provide that. And so your question will be directed to them, and we regularly make suggestions to our partners regarding equipment for interpretation. Now, regarding the definition of meeting types, again, as I said in my presentation, we have had to adapt as things have evolved. The Translation Bureau and freelance interpreters had to adapt significantly. In particular, the contract between them, which was amended in December, and which was looked at the beginning of the virtual sittings. Unfortunately, those contracts are coming to an end. There were informal talks. I participated myself with stakeholders and representatives of the interpreters, and those issues were discussed, and we are still in that consultation process. On February 5th, formal meetings began. It will become an RFP or a call for tenders. And the start date will be July 1st, and the framework will do a better job of taking into account these new virtual circumstances. Thank you, Parliamentary Secretary. So I'm understanding that you are aware, and as you know, there were certain problems, for example, toxic sound, as we heard from interpreters. What we're realizing is that even when there's one person like you this evening participating virtually, well, your participation means that interpreters must take into account that fact. So I would encourage you to consider that as soon as one participant is participating virtually, the meeting is virtual. It is important to take care of our interpreters because their work is so valuable. Have you taken actions to ensure that there's the sufficient pool of interpreters? We have heard about the shortage, especially of English toward French interpreters, because most work is done in that direction. We have heard that interpreters have been made work into their second language. Is this an important point for you? Mr. McKinnon, you have 20 seconds, please. Yes. So the circumstances for telework and virtual meetings have had an impact on interpretive resources. They are able to work fewer hours in a typical working shift. So yes, those resources are under pressure, but we are proud to be able to answer or to respond to all requests for service from party whips, Mr. Blaney. Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Arsenault.
6 prochaines minutes, s'il vous plaît. Allez-y.
6 minutes, Mr. Arsenault. Mr. Chairman, I think it was Marie-France, Madame Lalonde, who is going to have her questions first, so we'll start the time again. Thank you. I'm going to be sharing my time with Ms. Martinez-Ferrara. Thank you, Mr. McKinnon, for being with us, as well, thank you to the witnesses from the Translation Bureau. We are very concerned by the long-term hearing problems and the injuries that have occurred with our interpreters. interpreters. When AIC appeared, we were told that 70% of interpreters had suffered injuries because of toxic sound. So, Mr. McKinnon and the witnesses from the Translation Bureau, could you please tell us what the Translation Bureau is doing to prevent these injuries? I will ask Ms. Séguin to go into more detail, but I would first like to say that we have a rigorous, stringent program where we are doing research into this. We have adopted certain practices, and we certainly want to protect the hearing of our interpreters. I mentioned the example of the headsets. These headsets are being continually reassessed, and I want to recognize that in my answer to Mr. Blaney that I gave. So we certainly are working to protect the health and safety of our interpreters. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I also want to thank you for the invitation to participate in this study. The Translation Bureau is certainly very concerned by the increase in the number of injuries that have occurred, but the great majority of our staff interpreters are the ones involved, and we've got headaches, we've had exhaustion, tinnitus, and buzzing in the ears. Those are some of the problems that have occurred. I'm sorry. So we've certainly taken very serious measures, and we've undertaken a research study to look into this, but we are working short-term and long-term to protect our interpreters. And this was mentioned by the interpreters who appeared earlier in February, and it was noted that there are very few studies that have been done. We are working to set up and carry out a study into the hearing impacts of interpretation, and we're working with experts, with doctors. We immediately undertook changes. We have put in place compressor limiters that protect the hearing of interpreters. So that was one measure that was taken. As the parliamentary secretary said, we shortened the working time of the interpreters and the length of time between assignments. We are very pleased to see that you are concerned about the health and safety of interpreters and that you do the sound tests that are required before the meetings. And as well, the committees are requiring people to wear a headset with an integrated microphone and to use a wired connection instead of Wi-Fi. And also, people are asked to mute themselves if they are not speaking. We do the sound tests, and there is always a technician there in the room, and there is a coordinator as well on site if there are problems. We encourage interpreters to interrupt the service if they feel that their hearing is in danger or they cannot do the work properly, because we want them not to increase the volume, which can then cause injuries. I could give you more information about the research underway if you would like to hear about that. We work closely with the House of Commons, which is responsible for the technology. I have 1 minute left, I'm told. So I'm very pleased and proud to hear about all these measures. And so I will give my colleague the floor now for a question. 45 seconds left. All right, 45 seconds. I quickly want to thank our witnesses for being here tonight. I had a question because My colleague, Mr. McKinnon, said that the Translation Bureau has existed for at least 87 years. So there have been changes over the past few years. Does that explain why we have so many contract employees? Is it because the Translation Bureau has been weakened over the past 10 years or so? Mr. McKinnon, if you would like to answer quickly. There has been a problem because there have been few new interpreters, few people in training, and we haven't had the relations with universities that we need, but we're trying to change that. Now we will have Mr. Beaulieu for 6 minutes. Mr. Beaulieu. Thank you. On the one hand, we have been told that when interpreters work into their second language, the quality is not usually as good. Since most interpretation is into French, then the francophones pay the price for that. In the new supplier arrangement, you seem to want to entrench the idea of having 2 interpreters assigned, and that would mean that they will be working some into their second language. So would it not be better to increase the quality of services to avoid that? Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu, for that question. Of course, quality is our absolute priority. And to follow up on my response to Ms. Martinez-Ferrada, we are concerned about the quality of French and English and all the products that come out of the Translation Bureau. We, in 2015, created a position for quality control, and in 2017, we created a project involving the interpreters in that regard. We are now working in a different setting, a different context, because we have the pandemic, and we certainly want to include the changes that have had to be made because of that new COVID context. We want to put those into the new contract, and we certainly are taking the bidirectionality into account. If your priority is the best possible quality, would it not be better to always have teams of 3? What we're being told by the interpreters is that people don't usually work quite as well into their second language. So when they are doing remote interpretation, they need to be in a team of 3 because the majority of people are working remotely. In fact, it should not be the majority. It should really only be if even one person is remote. So could that change not be made to change that definition from a majority to even one participant being remote? Thank you very much for that question. As I indicated, we have brought in quite a large number of measures to make the work take into account the circumstances that we are experiencing. And usually we do have all of the resources that we need for our teams. We work with representatives from the industry, and we will continue to listen to them to make sure that we take those measures into account as we renew our contract. Maybe a short question just to end. If I come back to the headset, I was very surprised to learn that the headset that we are using, the Pantronic 310, is not in compliance with ISO standards. Perhaps we should have a headset that meets those standards. That would be a question that would be better addressed to the House of Commons administration. I can ask Ms. Séguin and Mr. Ball to provide more information. Thank you very much. That's a good question. The headset with an integrated mic would provide better quality if it was ISO compliant. But as was mentioned, this is something that should be addressed by the House of Commons. One last question. We were told by the clerk of the House that tests had been done with you to evaluate the sound system, the health and safety aspects, and so on. We would like to have the results of that, and we were told that the Translation Bureau would have to give its approval. So would you be in agreement to provide that information? Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chairman. We would be very pleased to provide those results. The study was carried out by the National Research Council of Canada, and we will consult the authors and provide that information. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Your time is up. Mr. Boulerice now. Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Very pleased that you're here. The Parliamentary Secretary told us that he was listening closely to the concerns of the interpreters. I hope that you have all the equipment that you need to hear and listen well. If I may, I would like to ask a question about the organizational structure. I would like to know who exactly is responsible for setting the sound levels that are potentially dangerous for the interpreters. Is it your department? Is it Public Services and Procurement Canada? Is it the Translation Bureau or a committee, perhaps PROC? Ms. Séguin? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question. I will ask our chief interpreter, Matthew Ball, about the standards that are used and that are set by the International Standards Organization, ISO. Matthew. Yes, there are a number of standards that the Translation Bureau complies with. First of all, there are standards concerning maximum sound levels. As well, there are Canadian Standards Association standards that we abide by regarding exposure. Thank you. I wasn't really asking about technical standards, but I would like to know who is responsible for ensuring enforcement and compliance with those standards. Is it the Translation Bureau? Is it Public Services and Procurement Canada? Or perhaps the Treasury Board, which is responsible for the public service? Thank you for that question. We are the supplier of the services. It's a common service. So we provide, as we do with other things, the services like real estate and so on. So we provide our clients with services that need to meet certain standards. We have collective agreements and so on. So we follow all of those standards very strictly. So I would ask Ms. Séguin also to answer as well. Thank you. As the employer of the staff interpreters, we are responsible for the standards for health and safety and other things and ensuring that they are followed. We are responsible for providing the human resources, and we work with the House of Commons to inform them of the needs of interpreters to provide quality service and protect their health and safety.
It's just that I only have 6 minutes. I think I understood where you were going with your answer. Thank you very much. Last week, Professor Stoll, or 2 weeks ago, Professor Stoll was quite clear. He said that it really is the Zoom platform that has an impact on the sound quality. The platforms that we are using are causing problems, and I would like to know what the specific measures are being taken to tackle this specific problem regarding Zoom. This is a question that goes beyond my expertise, Mr. Boulris. However, I can tell you that we are working together with partners worldwide, NATO, European Parliament, the United Nations, which all use simultaneous interpretation, not only to be compliant and to be up to date with the latest standards, but to be a leader. Here in Canada, we want to set an example. Perhaps Mr. Ball could provide further details on work he's doing with partners abroad to respect standards. No, thank you very much, Mr. McKinnon. I'm sure the work with partners abroad is done very well, but I'm asking about interpreters here. Having 3 working hours a day with potentially toxic sound, you'll agree, is a lot, and it's risky. As an employer, are you committed to the new contract, and I think the date of that is February 19th, will have no loophole for those workers to exceed 4 hours per day? Once again, Mr. Boulris, we are in the middle of the consultation process with freelance interpreters. We will continue to pay close attention, as we have been doing since the beginning of virtual work and the beginning of the pandemic, to accommodate them. On the one hand, to adopt all possible measures when it comes to equipment and technology and working standards to ensure their health and safety. Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. Well, committee members, as we had agreed, we have just finished this round of questions. We will have another round with Lucie Séguin, Chief Executive Officer of the Translation Bureau, and Matthew Ball, Director of Interpretation and Chief Interpreter of the Translation Bureau. And that will give us a chance now to thank Mr. Steve McKinnon for his presentation, as well as Mr. Michael Vandergrift, who is Associate Deputy Minister. So thank you to you too. We will continue on without disconnecting with our next discussions with Lucie Séguin and Matthew Ball, and Mr. Vandergrift will also be able to stay. To our Translation Bureau representatives, do you have a speech to present, or are you ready to answer members' questions? Ms. Séguin, we are ready to answer your questions and give you as much time as possible to ask them. Wonderful. In that case, we will now move on to a round of questions, starting with Mr. Blaney and Mr. Williamson once again for 6 minutes each. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question is for Ms. Séguin. Ms. Séguin, regarding the equipment, can you guarantee that MPs will have better equipment? Secondly, can you guarantee that when there's one person participating virtually in a meeting, that meeting will be deemed virtual? And can you speak to us about the pool of interpreters that work from English towards French? Do you have a shortage? And if so, how will you ensure that French interpretation is high quality? Thank you. Thank you for the question. Regarding equipment, we communicate the requirements to ensure health and safety and sound quality to our House of Commons partners who are responsible for providing you with the equipment. So that would be a point to take up with the House of Commons. As you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, things evolved quickly. New headsets were sent out very quickly. And now regarding the pool of interpreters, there are 94 staff interpreters. 5 of them are foreign language interpreters and 6 are sign language interpreters. This committee is most concerned with official languages interpreters. 25 are English interpreters and 38 are French interpreters. We rely heavily on private sector freelance interpreters, including AIC members, but also freelancers who are not represented. And there are over 100 accredited interpreters in Canada who passed the rigorous exam. Next, regarding your question on virtual meetings, I will give the floor to my colleague, Matthew Ball. Thank you. Thank you for the question. As you know, and as you are experiencing, interpretation virtually is evolving in Canada and around the world. So right now, everyone is in a transition phase to determine how to work in these new conditions. The Bureau based itself on decisions made elsewhere in the world regarding changes to the contract in place to take into consideration the more difficult conditions, for example, due to virtual sound. As you heard earlier, there is a request happening now where our colleagues at procurement are in discussions with the freelance community, and we are now waiting on the results. Thank you, Mr. Ball. I hope we'll be able to draw inspiration from what the European Parliament decides. Mr. Godin will use the rest of the time, Mr. Chair. Go ahead, Mr. Godin. You have less than 3 minutes left. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. I am coming to the committee new, and I'm hearing from all of the witnesses that we're taking great care of our interpreters. We've been in the pandemic for 10 months, but we're still fine-tuning to make sure that we are even better equipped. But things are going well. Except, Mr. Chair, last Friday, there was a committee, the Standing Committee on Health, and I don't want to say anything against my Liberal colleagues, but there was a filibuster, and the committee had to be suspended, and the blame was placed on interpreters. So if there is a problem of interpreter availability, what is the case here? I would like to know what the restrictions are, what problems have you been experiencing since the beginning of the pandemic, and what have you done tangibly, and what are you going to do quickly? Thank you very much for the question, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to mention that the situation is not without risks, and we are taking those risks seriously. As I mentioned, the majority of staff interpreters have submitted incident reports related to the poor sound quality. About 45 interpreters have sent in about 140 reports. The major reasons were headaches, earaches, excessive fatigue, ringing in the ears, etc. 2 of our interpreters are currently on sick leave because of sound-related problems, and that fluctuates widely. So we take that very seriously, and we put measures in place to protect their health and safety during this time when we are all adjusting and while we are finding ways to put measures in place to respect standards. Thank you, Ms. Séguin.
Monsieur Dubourg, vous êtes...
Mr. Dubourg, you're on mute. I'm sorry about that. Ms. Séguin, I was just going to say that that's all the time that we had. And now the next 6 minutes go to Mr. Arsenault. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will try and speak as slowly as possible because I think I'm the one who speaks the most quickly here. And when we're talking about interpretation, I feel like all eyes are on me. Ms. Séguin, I'd like to come back to my colleague, Mr. Baudry's question. Is it the Translation Bureau's role or the House Administration's role to take care of equipment? If I understood, the House takes care of the technical side, but there's also provision of equipment. Can you clarify the responsibility of one versus the other, please? Thank you very much for the question. So, given our legislative mandate at the Bureau, we provide the linguistic services. This evening, we're talking about interpretation, but we also have translators who are going to work tonight until the deliberations of this meeting have been translated. We have clients, and in this example, the client would be the House of Commons Administration. All of our clients, including the House Administration, are responsible for the platforms and the equipment when it comes to IT so that our interpreters can provide the service. This is the same case in the Senate, for example. So to ensure good sound quality, there's a very complex transmission chain. You've already heard about it, I believe. There's the human aspect. There is the technology aspect. There is the transmission aspect itself. And so the Translation Bureau, we are the experts to present that information to clients. And we also do take on freelance interpreters. And you take care of clients. And as we've been hearing for some time, there seems to have been an auditory injury problem. Can you tell us more about discussions with the House Administration team regarding this problem? Thank you for that question. We have daily discussions with clients, first to plan their sittings. When it comes to capacity, that is a twofold issue because the shortage of interpreters in Canada has been a long-standing issue. But also, virtual sittings have recently become much more popular. Take, for example, the Supreme Court. All of the Supreme Court's work is now virtual. In December, we cover 80 events a week at the House and Senate, whereas only a few months before it was between 20 and 40. So you can clearly see how quickly that has picked up. The needs of our democratic institutions has made our services much more solicited, and that is the same for our other linguistic services. Thank you. Do you have statistics that you think we could use to draft our report? If so, could you please send them to our committee? Do I have any time left, Mr. Chair? Yes, you have 1.5 minutes left. Wow, thank you. That's very generous. Ms. Seguin, or either of the three of you, could you tell me, before the pandemic and before virtual meetings, before Zoom and before these headsets became so commonplace, did your clients have a repertoire, events and incidents that had already been happening that your human resources kept track of? Thank you for the question. Yes, we certainly saw an increase after virtual meetings started because of the pandemic. But the health crisis was also a factor, and we saw a more marked increase since the beginning of the pandemic.
Do you see a correlation with the increase in demand? Yes. Thank you for that question. Yes, absolutely, there's a correlation. We have statistics and specific reports showing the correlation between the number of events that we're providing the services for and the number of injuries. And we require our employees to report any incident, whether they have discomfort or whether an injury. We need that documentation. And then the department takes that in hand. We also work with our union as a partner. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Arsenault. Now, for 6 minutes, we have Mr. Beaulieu. Go ahead, Mr. Beaulieu. Thank you. A little earlier, we talked a bit about the fact that was raised by the interpreters that people need to work into their first language to provide the best possible service, and that when they work into their second language, the quality isn't quite as good. So I would like to know what percentage of interpreters are francophones. You talked about 25 anglophones and 38 francophones, so that looks like it's about 60%. But we know that the vast majority of witnesses appear in English. Thank you very much. Through the chair, I would like to give you a little bit of information about the accreditation process at the Translation Bureau, which is very rigorous and internationally recognized as one of the most rigorous in the world. The accreditation process used by the Translation Bureau is what is required to be able to work for us. We make sure that interpreters can work into their dominant language as well as into their second language. And the accredited interpreters that we use that work for the Bureau have been tested, and this is also in compliance with the Official Languages Act. A number of interpreters choose to work in both directions, but we don't require our interpreters to do that, including our freelancers. If they are not comfortable working to their second language, they are not required to do so. But as you know, I can certainly ask Mr. Ball to give you more information on the professional aspects and how the work is done in the booth. But you asked about the proportion. We've got a total of 63 interpreters. We have 25 who work toward English mainly, or that's their dominant language, and 38 who are francophones. Thank you. Something that surprised us was that we heard about the fact that the Zoom platform is separate from the interpretation system, and we were told that the sound system was good, high quality, but that Zoom provided a lower quality of sound, and that the quality of sound isn't good that comes through Zoom, and then the interpreters have to turn up the volume, and that often creates the injuries. Is there any solution that you can see to that? Thank you very much to the member for that question. I will ask Mr. Ball to talk about the research that the Bureau is involved in to measure the quality and quantity of sound. But I would say first that we want to be very honest in telling you that we don't have solutions to all of the problems with sound quality, but we have a mandate to continue to provide service to Parliament and to make sure that people can speak in both official languages. So, Matthew, would you have something to add about the sound quality testing? Thank you. And through the chair, the issue of the sound quality is a new problem. We know that a high quantity, like high decibel level of sound, is something that can damage hearing. But now we are dealing more with problems of quality of sound. And the Bureau is working on this issue. We are partnering with the University of Geneva as well as with the NRC here on Canada. So we're trying to understand better how the sound quality can affect health and safety. We know that there is certainly a problem. This has been brought to our attention. And this is why we are trying to gain a better understanding of what the issues are. Zoom may be part of the problem, but Zoom is used around the world for virtual meetings. There are other platforms. We are doing testing as well to see if those platforms have the same impact on health and safety. We have many aspects to the system, the microphones and so on. Yes, very well. We know that the headsets are not compliant. The Zoom platform is not compliant, far from it. And so we would like to see the results when you have them. So from what we understand, the solution is to decrease the number of hours of work, to increase the number of interpreters. You say that you are doing whatever you can to seek more independent contractors, but you seem to be going to require them to work in teams of two in distance, in remote situations. Just a very short answer, please. Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman. The initiative that the Translation Bureau is undertaking to increase capacity we are calling on our seasoned interpreters to provide training at the University of Ottawa. There's also Glendon College at York University that provides training. We hire all of the graduates from those programs. There are very few that come through those programs because they are very rigorous. And there aren't any other institutions in Canada that provide the training. So we provide accreditation as well to freelance interpreters. Thank you, Ms. Séguin. Now, Mr. Boulris. 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the witness for staying with us and being here tonight. I'm concerned and a little bit confused by the answers that we've had in this last round of questions. Ms. Séguin, you said that you haven't solved all of the issues concerning sound quality, and Mr. Ball, you say that you are still looking at the impact of the various platforms that are being used. So are you not putting the health and safety of interpreters at risk because you don't really know what the impact is? Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I will answer. Yes, the pandemic has certainly launched us into remote interpreting more quickly than we had expected. Remote interpreting was already done to a certain extent. We adapted very quickly. And in order to compensate for the increased cognitive burden and also to compensate the risks which are real, we reduced the hours of work that interpreters are expected to do, and that includes both staff and freelance interpreters. We have contractual mechanisms in place that need to be adapted to make sure that we can have provisions that will continue to protect the health and safety of interpreters. So we have to put those into the contract. We certainly have every incentive to listen to interpreters' concerns about health and safety so that we can continue to provide the service. Yes, you need them, and certainly we do, to be able to respect official language rules. You are saying that you are studying the issue, you don't really know what the impacts are, and so it seems like the interpreters right now are guinea pigs. If there is toxic sound, that's how the impact will be studied. So let's talk about the distance issue. When we actually come back to in-person meetings, if the witnesses are off-site, even though members are there in the room, that will be considered as an in-person meeting. And that is a very great concern to the interpreters, because if the witnesses are not in the room, then that's not an in-person situation. Thank you very much for the question. In Canada, in the Translation Bureau, the impact of poor sound quality have not yet been determined. You heard here from AIC, which said the same thing. We are using resources to assess these impacts, and we are cooperating with AIC and with non-represented contractors to get these results, and we will be sharing them when we have them. So when we had in-person meetings, we required interpreters to work for 6 hours. Now we are requiring them to work for 4 hours. So the active interpretation hours are 3 hours.
We recognize the inherent risk. And at the same time, we also put in place other measures such as the sound limiters. We support our employees and the freelancers when they interrupt service. You will have noticed that when interpreters cannot hear, they interrupt. And so we support them in that. And we're also delighted to see that you, MPs and the honorable senators, are indulgent. And if I may, Ms. Séguin, because I just have one moment left, the chair just indicated to me. I'm pleased that you have reduced hours. I hope there will be no loopholes in the upcoming freelancer contract so that they will have to work more than 4 hours a day. Mr. Ball said he was in consultation with the European Parliament. In the European Parliament's definition, if one participant is not in the room, the sitting is considered virtual. If you're consulting with European Parliament, does that mean that you are ready to adopt that same definition and to use it to protect the health and safety of our interpreters here in Canada? Thank you. The definition you are alluding to was included for the first time on February 5th in the, or rather, we are going to gather the information, and there will be an open door discussion tomorrow evening to ask for points of view. We are looking forward to hearing points of view regarding the market to be able to put measures in place. Thank you very much for the feedback. We heard loud and clear with the right headset. Thank you very much, Mr. Séguin, and thank you as well to Mr. Boulris. That is all the time we had to ask questions to witnesses. I see 2 raised hands, Ms. Latanzio and Mr. Beaulieu. Is it for something else than to ask questions to the witnesses? Go ahead, Ms. Latanzio. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given that this evening we cut our sitting a little short, I'd like to share the following. I found an article that mentions the Zoom platform, and I think it is relevant to share it with my committee members. Here's the title. It has a French and English version. And Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask you, with your permission, to be able to distribute this article to my colleagues. It's by a European accredited interpreter from the European Union. I'm just going through my emails, and the title is Challenges of the Parliamentary Interpretation Service in the Context of the COVID-19 Pandemic. I would normally trust a German expert.
Service d'interprétation parlementaire dans le contexte de la pandémie COVID-19. Normalement, je ferais confiance à un expert allemand.
That was the French title. Mr. Chair, with your permission and with my colleagues' indulgence, please advise me how to distribute that article to committee members. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Latanzio. Now Mr. Beaulieu has the floor, and I will come back to you on that, Ms. Latanzio. Quickly, on February 2nd, I just want to make a correction. I was referring to the Board of Internal Economy document that said that 86% of witnesses appeared in English participants, but really it is witnesses. And that wasn't taken into consideration because when I brought it up, we were in camera. That's why I wanted to bring it up again. Thank you very much. That is noted. Regarding Ms. Latanzio's article now, please forward it to the clerk in both official languages, and she will be able to distribute it to members and to the analysts. And Mr. Beaulieu, we are not in camera at this time, so your intervention will be duly noted. I would now like to thank our witnesses for being with us tonight. First, we had Ms. Lucie Séguin, Chief Executive Officer for the Translation Bureau, Mr. Michael Vandergrift, Associate Deputy Minister, who stayed on with us, and Mr. Matthew Ball, Director of Interpretation and Chief Interpreter of the Translation Bureau. On behalf of all committee members, I would like to thank the entire technical team, the interpreters, clerks, and analysts for being with us tonight and enabling us to prolong this very important sitting. With that, the sitting is adjourned. Thank you very much.